You've made your suffering beautiful. And that's the problem. You curate your pain like it's art. You collect quotes about darkness and storms and broken people who shine like stars. You save poems about beautiful sadness to your phone like they're prayers. Like they're proof that your hurt means something profound. You've built an altar to your own anguish. Your playlist is a museum of melancholy. Every song a monument to how deeply you feel, how uniquely you suffer, how poetically you break. You press repeat on the tracks that make you cry because crying feels like cleansing, like ritual, like the only honest thing you do all day. But you're not cleansing, you're marinating. You screenshot quotes about trauma and healing and post them to your story like they're scripture. She was a storm disguised as a girl, broken crayons, still color. Your wounds are where the light enters you. You share them with the solemnity of someone who's discovered profound truth, but you're not sharing wisdom. You're advertising. You're advertising your damage to a world that you've convinced yourself finds brokenness beautiful. And maybe some of them do. Maybe some of them double tap your posts and comment "felt this," and sending love, and you feel seen. Validated, less alone in your careful cultivation of despair. But what you've really done is turn your pain into content. You perform your struggles like they're theater. You talk about your anxiety like it's a personality trait, your depression like it's a superpower, your trauma like it's a medal of honor. You've learned the language of psychology and use it like poetry, throwing around words like triggered and boundaries and toxic with the casual precision of someone who's made their dysfunction into their identity. And when someone suggests you might be getting better, you resist. Not consciously, not obviously, but you resist. Because who are you without your wounds? Who are you if you're not the one who's been through it? Who understands? Who carries the beautiful burden of deep feeling in a shallow world? Who are you if you're not the sensitive one, the complicated one, the one whose pain makes them interesting? You've confused depth with damage. You tell yourself you're self-aware, that you're processing, that you're on a healing journey. But healing journeys have destinations, and you've been walking in circles for months, for years, admiring the scenery of your own suffering like a tourist who never wants to go home. You know the difference between healing and performing healing. You know the difference between processing trauma and polishing it until it shines. You know the difference between growth and just getting comfortable with your own stagnation. You know, but you don't want to know. Because knowing means admitting that you've been lying to yourself about wanting to get better. Because knowing means admitting that you've been using your pain as an excuse not to try, not to risk, not to show up fully in a world that might reject the real you instead of the tragic you. The tragic you is safer. The tragic you has built-in reasons for failure. The tragic you gets sympathy instead of expectation. The tragic you is allowed to be small, to hide, to make sadness into an aesthetic instead of an emergency. You've made your mental health into a brand, and I know because I was you. I know the specific comfort of waking up sad, of checking your reflection for signs of suffering, of feeling disappointed when you have a good day, because good days don't fit the narrative you've built around yourself. I know how you scroll through old conversations, old photos, old wounds like they're comfort food. How you revisit your trauma like it's a childhood home you can't bear to sell. How you wear your scars like jewelry, display your triggers like trophies. Treat your therapy sessions like performance art. I know how you fall in love with people who are also broken, because it feels like finding your tribe, your people, your fellow travelers in the land of beautiful damage. And how you run from people who are healthy because they make you feel like you're not special, not deep, not carrying anything worth carrying. I know how you've convinced yourself that happiness is shallow, that contentment is boring, that peace is for people who don't understand the profound weight of existence. But here's what I learned in the space between performing my pain and actually feeling it. You're not deep, you're stuck. You're not profound. You're performing. You're not beautifully broken. You're just broken. And you've decided that's beautiful because it's easier than deciding to heal. You've romanticized your pain because romance is easier than recovery. Romance is passive. Recovery is active. Romance lets you be the victim of your own story. Recovery makes you the author. And being the author is terrifying because it means you're responsible for how the story ends. You've been telling yourself that your suffering is special, that your darkness is deep, that your wounds are wise. But suffering isn't special. Everyone suffers. Your darkness isn't deep. It's just dark. Your wounds aren't wise. They're just wounds. And wounds are meant to heal, not to be decorated. You're not healing. You're decorating your wounds. You're hanging fairy lights on your trauma and calling it growth. You're putting your depression in a pretty frame and calling it art. You're writing poetry about your pain and calling it processing. But processing means letting go, not holding on. Processing means moving through, not moving in. Processing means the pain changes you, not that you change the pain into something you can live with forever. You've been living with your pain so long, you've forgotten that living with pain isn't the same as being alive. You've confused surviving with thriving, enduring with growing, managing with healing. You've made your dysfunction into your identity, and your identity into your prison. And the cruelest part, you hold the key. You've always held the key. But you've convinced yourself that staying locked up is noble, that your cage is a sanctuary, that your prison is a palace of deep feeling and authentic experience. But it's just a prison. And you're both the prisoner and the guard. Every time someone offers you a way out, you find a reason why it won't work. Every time you have a moment of clarity, you cloud it with familiar fog. Every time you feel yourself getting better, you sabotage it because better feels like betrayal of the self you've worked so hard to build. The self that suffers so beautifully, the self that hurts so poetically, the self that breaks so artistically. But what if you stopped being beautiful and started being real? What if you stopped being poetic and started being present? What if you stopped being artistic and started being alive? What if you let yourself be boring? What if you let yourself be stable? What if you let yourself be happy without having to earn it through suffering first? What if you let yourself heal without having to document it, perform it, or turn it into content for other people who are also stuck in the aesthetics of their own anguish? What if you just healed quietly, privately, without an audience, without applause? Without validation from people who are attracted to your damage? What if healing meant losing the parts of yourself that you've confused with your whole self? What if getting better meant getting boring? What if recovery meant becoming unrecognizable to the person who built their entire identity around being broken? Here's your cold truth. Healing will cost you your identity. Getting better will cost you your community. Recovery will cost you the story you've been telling about yourself. The story that makes you special, makes you deep, makes you different from all the shallow, happy people you've learned to pity. Healing will make you ordinary. And maybe that terrifies you more than staying sick. Maybe ordinary feels like death when you've been living as a beautiful tragedy. Maybe wellness feels like betrayal when you've been faithful to your wounds. Maybe happiness feels like forgetting when you've been remembering so devotedly. But here's what ordinary actually is. It's freedom. Freedom from the exhausting performance of your own pain. Freedom from the constant curation of your suffering. Freedom from the relentless documentation of your damage. Ordinary is waking up and not checking how sad you are. Ordinary is having a good day without feeling guilty about it. Ordinary is being stable without being boring, being healthy without being shallow, being happy without being simple. But you'll never know that as long as you're addicted to the drama of your own destruction, as long as you're in love with the aesthetic of your own anguish, as long as you're committed to the romance of your own ruin, you've romanticized your pain. And now your pain is all you know. And now you don't know who you are without it.